Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you again with another deck profile, and for today's video we're going to be doing an updated Tearlament list. Now for this video we're going to be using both the Horus engine and the Fiendsmith engine, just to be able to mill as many cards as possible, as evidenced by the Exceed monsters that you see before you, being the Zombie Vampire, which allows us to mill 4 cards, and the Pilgrim Reaper, which allows us to mill 5 cards. And then when you combine it with all the other Tearlament cards, we should be able to mill pretty much everything that we need, ideally. So with that out of the way, let's jump straight into it. As always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup first, and as far as the Tearlament portion is concerned, we're just literally maxing out on every single card available to us. So, as a result, we're playing 3 Tearlaments Reinoheart, who on normal or special summon is able to foolish any Tearlament monster from your deck to the graveyard, except itself. So that means you're either sending your Tear Cache to mill 2 cards, or you're sending any of your other 3 in order to be able to fusion summon. And this is basically the guy that just gets your entire engine rolling, right? As it pretty much gets you access to whatever card you may need in a certain situation. And yeah, you basically just have to play 3 of it whenever you're playing pure Tearlament. Then to accompany our 3 Reinohearts, you're playing 3 Tearlaments Kashtira, who on normal or special summon is able to mill 3 cards from either your deck or your opponent's deck, but it's pretty much always going to be from your deck, just because we want to mill as many cards as possible, right? And it's able to special summon itself during either player's main phase by banishing a Tearlament card from either your hand or your graveyard, which means that throughout the course of the game, you're going to be filling up your graveyard more than likely with tons of Tearlament spells and traps that you no longer need. So they make perfect fodder for Tear Cache to come down and just mill 3 cards constantly. And as if that wasn't already enough, when it's sent to the graveyard, it mills 2 more cards for a potential 5-card mill. So yeah, Tear Cache, pretty good card in a deck like this, not gonna lie. Then for the 1-ofs, we're playing the 1 of Tearlaments Merrli, the 1 of Tearlaments Havnis, and the 1 of Tearlaments Scheiren. They're all capable of milling 3 cards, but more important than that, these are the ones that allow us to actually fusion summon in the deck. And, you know, they're all limited, so we can only play 1 of each, but that's perfectly fine because they still get the job done either way. And that's it for the tier monsters. And then for the cards that help the deck out, that we're also playing, we're going to be playing 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Ring. It doesn't actually help the deck, despite what I just said. It's literally only in there to stop the Mole Charmies, ideally. We're playing 3 Imsety Glory of Horus and 1 Hapi Guidance of Horus. So these cards actually help out because these are basically the ones that we use to turbo into the Zombie Vampire. And then the Zombie Vampire will allow us to mill 4 more cards. But even if you don't access Zombie Vampire, say because you've already milled everything by the time this engine even becomes relevant, that's perfectly fine as well because they do provide you with 2 bodies that happen to be level 8 with 2400 attack and 3000 attack respectively that do have pretty solid effects of like pop and like shuffle cards in the graveyard back into the deck or the hand, which means that they do provide you with some pretty valuable disruption that your opponent is going to have to deal with at some point. Then for the other cards, for the Fiendsmith engine, we're just playing 2 engravers, and that's perfectly fine, right? Like, we don't care about Lacrima, we don't care about Larry. 2 engravers is all we need because we're basically just playing turbo rank 6 at this point. And that's all we need it for, right? Whether you're playing Pilgrim Reaper or DDD Wave High King Caesar, even something like a Volzar Lars. The point is, by having just 2 of these, we can pretty much do that whenever we want. So yeah, perfectly fine as that. And that I genuinely just don't miss the other cards, which you typically only play if you want to commit to like the Desiree line, which like I said, we're not doing because we only care about the rank 6s. And then for the 1 of cards that we're playing to help to support the deck, we're playing 1 Mudora the Sword Oracle because you need some kind of shuffler, 1 Helshaddoll Hollow, which is essentially just like another potential couple of mills, as it's able to mill cards equal to the number of different attributes that you have on your side of the field, right? So at minimum, that means it's typically going to be able to mill 1, but there are certain situations where you're able to hit like 3 to 4 and just like continue cycling through your deck. But most important of all, this is the card that allows us to access Helshaddoll Winda, which is a pretty important card in a lot of matchups because it just prevents your opponent from special summoning more than once. So yeah, 1 Helshaddoll Hollow, and then for the final monster, we're playing 1 Beastking of the Swamps because I felt like playing Rukalos this time. Simple as that. If we don't play this, we don't play Rukalos, but I just wanted to include it. So with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion. Now that we're on the spell and trap portion of the video, we'll be starting off with Primeval planet Perlereino, which we are of course going to be playing at 3 copies. So this card on activation is able to search your deck for any Tearlament monsters. So that means you can add your Scheiren, your Havnis, your Merrli, Reinoheart, Tear Cache, whatever. Point is, this is pretty much the perfect go-to starter for you to fix your hand and get it to the exact way that you want. And if that wasn't already enough, it boosts all your tiers and your fusions by 500 attack, as well as it's capable of blowing up cards whenever a tier monster gets shuffled back into the deck. So you can blow up your own cards if you want to like further extend, or you break down something like Trivikarma, for example, or you can just blow up your opponent's cards to disrupt their field. Then to accompany our 3 Primeval planets, we're playing 3 Tearlaments Scream, which is basically just the card that allows us to mill 3 more cards, as all you have to do is control a face-up Tearlament monster, and whenever you or your opponent special summons, you get to mill 3 cards, and then for the rest of this turn, this card just lowers all your opponent's monsters by 500 attack, for whatever reason. Now, it's also capable of searching out your Tearlament traps, such as your Metanoise, your Sulliek, and potentially your Crime if you play it, but for the most part, it's typically going to be searching out Sulliek, and we really mainly care about like the mill 3 just because this is a Tearlament deck, so we still want to mill as many cards as possible. That's it for the 3-ofs though, and then for the 2-ofs, we're only playing 1 card at 2, being the 2 King Sarcophagus, so that we can actually take advantage of our Horus engine, as this card needs to be face up on the field in order for you to actually be able to bring them back. But this card is also pretty solid at just helping you get rid of bricks from your hand and putting them in the graveyard, right? Like your Trivikarma, like your Beastking, like your Shufflers, things of that nature. Now, you can discard your Tearlaments monsters and cards like Helshaddoll Hollow, but they won't trigger because it discards for cost. So just be aware that it doesn't trigger all your cards, but it is helpful at helping you like thin down your hand and getting rid of cards that you normally don't want in there. Now for the 1-of spells, we're playing 1 Fiendsmith Sanct because it's literally just Hornet drones, but for the Fiendsmith combo, and because we only care about going straight into the rank 6s, it's perfectly fine, right? Even if you don't want to play Tract, you can still make a perfectly fine substitute with this, as it still gets the entire job done pretty much the exact same way. However, one bonus that this card has is that it basically allows you to play through Droll, right? Whereas previously, if you go activate Engraver, add Tract, and they Droll you, Tract is just a dead card entirely. But that's no longer the case because we now have a backup plan in Sanct. And then speaking of Tract, we're still going to be playing Tract as well, just because it allows us to add cards such as our Engraver. And then even though we don't really have cards like in the Lightsworn version, such as Weiss, that's still perfectly fine because there are plenty of cards to discard, right? Every single one of our Tearlament cards gets triggered off of this discard. And then there's still just like generic cards that you don't want in your hand, like the Beastking, the Mudora, and all those other guys. So yeah, 1 Tract, perfectly fine. And then we're also playing 1 Tearlaments Grief to special summon tier monsters out of our decks or our graveyard, and we just have to send something with the same type or attribute as the monster that we summon from our side of the field to the graveyard, but that's perfectly fine. And there are even a lot of situations where you activate this, and then you summon something, say, such as a Reinoheart, and then you send that Reinoheart to trigger its graveyard effect to bring itself back, and if you have like a tier cache, right, you can chain it to the effect, special summon the tier cache by banishing this, and then you still get to summon out the Reinoheart, even if you don't have any tier monsters in your hand. So, you know, something cool to consider. And then this is also the one that allows us to add back our banished traps, which does come up pretty frequently. Now we're also playing the 1 Foolish Burial to send any monster, as well as the 1 Foolish Burial Goods to send any spell or trap. And then, to follow those up, we're playing the 1 Triple Tactics Talent and the 1 Call Upon the Grave, just to try and help us play through hand traps a little bit more easily. And with that, that's the spells. And now for the traps, we're playing the 2 Tearlaments Sulliek to be able to negate our opponent's monsters, as well as search out our own Tearlament monsters, because that's what it does, right? So its on-field effect is to negate monsters, or to negate our opponent's monster's effects by sending a card or sending a monster on our side of the field, as long as we control a tier monster. And then when it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, it searches out any of our tier monsters, and that means this is pretty much going to be like one of the main methods that we have in addition to the planet to just access our tier engine more consistently. We have the 1 Tearlaments Metanoise, which allows us to add back Tearlament monsters from our graveyard, as well as Book of Moon any potential monsters our opponent has. As if that wasn't already enough, the Book of Moon effect also happens to have like a Foolish Burial effect for any of our Tearlament monsters. So, yeah, this card, it's just pretty solid, and it's just, ever since Bahamut Shard got banned, it pretty much became like an auto staple 1-of at least, to be able to recur our resources. And then finally, we have the 1 Trivikarma. As this card, when it's in the graveyard, we can banish it, and then it allows us to search our deck for every single Tearlament spell and trap, because every single one mentions Visa Starfrost. Now, this is probably like the main brick of the deck, but that's perfectly fine. We can just accept the trade-off, right? And as mentioned previously, we have plenty of ways to get it in the graveyard. You know, we have Imsety, King Sark, Fiendsmith Tract, you know, things of that nature. We could even like set it and then pop it with our planet if need be. But point is, we have plenty of ways to get it in there, so even if you draw it, it's not the end of the world. And with that, that's the spell and trap lineup, and as well as the main deck, should be 40 cards like always, and now we can finally move on to the extra deck. For the extra deck, we're going to be starting off with the Exceed monsters first, and as a result, that means we're playing 1 Time Thief Redoer, as this is pretty much just like the perfect rank 4 for this deck, as it allows us to take cards like our Scheiren and our Reinoheart, overlay them, and then because it detaches as part of the effect, instead of detaching for cost, it will trigger them every single time. And that's pretty useful for just being able to get something like that into the graveyard in order to get our fusion plays across. And as if that wasn't already enough, it's also able to take our opponent's cards and add them to their own, and then depending on what it takes, it gets additional effects, right? So when it has a monster as a material, it can banish itself until the end phase, and that's going to be like the default effect every time. But if it has a spell, it's able to draw you a card, and if it has a trap, you're able to take one of your opponent's face-up cards and put it on top of the deck. So yeah, you get a lot of value out of the cards that you're able to take with Redoer. Then for the other two Exceeds that we're playing, the one Pilgrim Reaper to mill 5 cards, and then the one Zombie Vampire to mill 4 cards, as well as special summon a monster. So yeah, pretty good at just helping you get through your engine as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Then for the links, we're playing the one Fiendsmith Requiem, which is literally only here to special summon out Engraver from the deck and enable our rank 6 plays. One Moon of the Closed Heaven to turn any 2 monsters into full Fiendsmith combo. One IP Masquerena, which is either going into the SP Little Knight to banish a card, or the Spright Sprind to send Merrli in order to fusion summon. And this is also really important for time as well, because we are siding cards like Scattershot, which you just unfortunately need because decks like this do unfortunately take a very long time to play, especially if you're playing them properly. Not because you're like slow playing or anything, it's just the nature of the deck. But yeah, got to include those, and that's it for the links. And then for the fusions, we're playing the one Necroquip Princess. Now, admittedly, this one isn't really all that needed just because both engravers are already level 6, right? But there are still certain situations that you're going to find yourself in where you're going to discard a card for cost and then you just get like an additional draw, whether it's through your King, Sark, or because you opened up an engraver in your hand. So it's still nice to include this just in case, but by far this is the most cuttable piece of the entire engine. Unless the engraver gets limited, then you pretty much have to play it. But as of right now, it's perfectly fine. We're playing the one Helshaddoll Winda to just basically floodgate our opponent, even though I don't really enjoy that playstyle. One Mud Dragon of the Swamp, one Guru Wings of Resident Life, and one Predaplant Dragostapelia, all of which are cards that are made at some point throughout the game just to recycle your resources. And for those of you that are main decking Super Poly, this would be your main Super Poly targets, especially, like I said, if you're maining Super Poly. So these are the guys that you're typically going to be making to break your opponent's board if you're not recycling your own resources. And then for the tier fusions, we have the one Tearlaments Reinoheart, which is what we bring out with our Beastking of the Swamp. And this basically just functions as a special summon negate. And then lastly, we have the one Tearlaments Kashtira to shuffle back our opponent's cards, as well as just come back and then be able to foolish a tier card from our deck to the graveyard whenever this card happens to be sent from field to grave. So with that, that's the Tearlament deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!